Welcome back, guys, to another episode of ProView. Uh, before I introduce the guests, welcome Amit
Thank you,
to
Mon
this
sir.
show.
Wish you very happy Pongal and wish you very happy Makar Sankranti.
Thank you, thank
And
you.
for
Wish you the
all
same.
those viewers who are watching, very happy festive season, guys. Mon sir, today's guest is a very special guest because if I go back in year 2017, uh, one image went so viral, and that was in fact the first photographic evidence for me when I saw that image. Do you remember that image of fishing cat with a fish
Yes,
in the mouth?
of
Okay.
course, of course.
And that day, I see. I know this gentleman before, but then that work was simply amazing. And after that, I think 18, Mr. Anjani Kumar, okay, has introduced his own product, which is a Turtle Pro. So, without further delay, I mean, let me welcome Anjani because I wanted to hear all these stories from his mouth. So, welcome,
Welcome,
Anjani.
Anjani.
Good
Welcome,
morning,
sir.
sir, and a very happy new year, Amit Bhai, Mohan sir. Very happy new year.
Thank you so much,
Thank
sir.
you.
Wish you very happy Makar Sankranti and Pongals also.
Uh,
Anjali sir, I don't want to waste time talking a lot of other stuff because I wanted to, take the people go through a lot of technical thing because we already had one session on the camera traps, and I'm sure we wanted to know more and more about this from you also because your work is simply again amazing. So okay,
Thank you so much, Amit Bhai. It's an
so
honor being with you guys.
it's our pleasure to have you on the session, Anjani. Thank you for
Thank you so
joining.
much.
So before we
Thank you so
actually
much.
enter, Anjani, one small question. Okay, you have a background from the music
Yeah,
industry. Okay,
yeah,
okay, a performing artist, and then
yeah.
now you have a store there for
Yeah.
musical instruments. From where this photography journey started, Anjani?
My photography, actually, I'm basically a wildlife lover, Amit Bhai. I started visiting jungles in 2006 just as a tourist. From 2006 to 2013, I was just visiting these jungles as a tourist. That's it. We as a group, we just wanted to go a couple of times in a year and then see tigers and come back. That's it. Jana 600 800 kilometers, go for a drive, daru waru pina, acha resort mein tehna, you look at the tigers and come back. That was a more of an unwind thing. And I always used to say, tiger ko lens mein se kya dekhte yaar. So I never used to like, watching a tiger from a binoculars or from a viewfinder. I wanted to see tiger as it is. But as I kept going by, and I was accompanying photographers like Masood, Dr. Sharath, and all that. So they insisted that you should at least start documenting whatever you're seeing. So in 2013 May, I started with a point and shoot camera, and then they slowly encourage saying that you've got a good eye for photography, then then a basic DSLR with that 1855, then 7300, it just went on. But otherwise, basically I'm a tiger lover and a nature lover uh, than photography. So it just followed the path, and not that consciously I wanted to be a wildlife photographer or anything like that. Even now, I'm more of a serious hobbyist than than a profession or a full-time activity for me.
Yeah. So from that normal focal length of 1855, 7300, then 600 mm, 500 mm, now your focal lengths have changed, and I wanted to know the story behind this.
It's been a total journey, Amit bhai. I started with this 1855 and the 7300. Okay, and when I used to shoot the birds, and then they used to look so tiny, immaterial of how much ever I crop, they used to look so tiny. Then I used to ask Masood bhai, "Arey, how is it that you guys are getting it so close?" Then he said, "Now, if you want to do birding, you'll have to get to that 500 and all." Even while shooting with the normal FPS or whatever it is, when I was shooting the tigers, 3 FPS, 4 FPS was not enough at all. Then slowly you start realizing that you need a faster camera, you need a better ISO. Ek din 5 o'clock ke baad, then you realize you need a better ISO. Then 500 focal length. You just keep pushing those limits of the technical aspects and all. And those days, whenever a photographer used to tell me that you need with any camera you can shoot good photographs, So I used to think, buggers, you guys are getting all those faces and eyes and all that, and you're trying to tell me to use any camera to get those good images. Nahi hoga aisa. So that was a perception. You guys use a 600 and ask me to shoot with any camera. Nahi hone ka hai wo. So then you start pushing the envelope, and then you take these personal loans and all this, and then moving up that And now again, coming back to it, now I realize, yeah, there is a lot you can do with an 18 or a 24 I know other beginner photographers must be thinking the same thing about me now.
True.
So,
And Anjani bhai, without any further delay, actually I wanted to see what actually you can reproduce from a basic body and a basic lens. So I want you to kindly share that insights, man. Please, all yours.
yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, there is a saying by Ansel Adams saying that you don't take a photograph, you make it. Now, the moment you start this remote photography, you get into that mode of, making an image. Unlike you going into the forest with your regular cameras and where you document whatever you've seen in that particular moment, whatever is happening. It's more like you are there, wildlife photography is more like, you're there at the right place at the right time to click that right image. Two, you're going to have a transition saying that, this is the image I want, which is pre-visualized at your home during your dreams or whatever it is. This is a image you pre-visualize and then go to the field to execute and get that image.
Right.
Now, if you look at my current work, probably Mohan sir and Amit bhai, I think 75% or more of the images are the ones which I usually visualize them at home.
Oh,
okay.
You might get a little more or less or a slightly different shot, but more or less the frames have been pre-visualized and you set up the scene like that. Yeah. It's like you set up the entire studio and you anticipate the model to walk in and take its photograph.
Right.
So you're lighting up the scene, setting up the scene, everything. So this is more of, what you visualize and what you get is the more way you're going at. And again, as a photographer, it is important for us to be different also, not just about the good images. When you hear comments like, this Ambika bhai who said, when you start recognizing from a photographer the actual man behind the camera.
Yeah.
I felt very good, when you read comments like this. So the moment somebody spots your, sees your image, even before reading your name, they think, okay, this is Anjani's image or this is Mohan sir's image. That is where you start creating your own style of an image or your own recognition. And, if you are looking at the current digital age or internet age, the amount of photographs you see per day are amazing, man. Even, guys taking, mobile shots or whatever it is with, there's so much of good images which you see on Instagram or Facebook on a day-to-day basis. So it's very important for us to, step aside from this one and, it's important for somebody to stop at least for a few seconds while browsing.
Very true.
That means it made your day. While browsing, if they stop for your particular image, and that is important, not just about scrolling. So, you can make your own style, and there is a lot of chance for being creative when you get into remote photography. True. Not just about, not that you're not creative on field with a regular camera, but your scope increases with, the scope of lighting and the kind of scene you can set. It is not going to be something like, you go to a safari and you get 300 images and you get about 5 uploads. Your game is going to be very frustrating, but it is going to be, what you anticipate or what you visualize is what you're getting.
True.
So, then again, not just about the photo, you can talk so much about the soul and the narrative of the image and the species and the scenarios and all that, So your dimension is expanding, not just sticking to a particular form of photography or creativity.
Yeah. In fact, in your case, Anjani, the moment I hear that term called fishing cat matlab Anjani Kumar. I always correlate that one species with you, man.
Yeah.
And so many documentation, publications. I mean, I always see your images in that. So congratulations, man, for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, but when I mentioned about choosing a subject, also that was a very conscious effort for me. You know, I thought that species was not documented well across the globe, and I strategically chose that subject so that this was a subject which was not covered too much across the globe.
Yeah.
So I thought I'll focus there and get some shots, and I thought I succeeded in that plan, and even my recognition has come through the fishing cat images. So I mean, as a plan, it did work out, and I'm happy with that. Coming to why I choose this remote photography is the impact of these images are going to be much more than what we could get from a telephoto lens. It's going to get a different perspective. Aesthetically they are more pleasing images, and with a regular telephoto lens, if you're looking at a habitat shot, the animal is going to look very small in the entire frame.
True.
It is going to be a beautiful image, but the prominence of that animal is going to be very little in the whole frame. So here the advantage of the moment you get wide angle and you go closer to the animal with whatever technology, whether it is a remote trigger or a buggy or a camera trap, you can get those animals also very close and also cover the habitat. So you're going to get both the portrait and the landscape image together, which is informative, visually more pleasing. You're also depicting the beauty of the environment and the habitat where it is there, and you can use the background space much better.
Yes.
Because you choose the scene before and you set up the camera accordingly. So there is a lot of scope for you to, use the background. I mean, right now I don't have much of mountains or whatever it is, but you can get right now, if you plan, you can get mountains on the backdrop, say the waterfalls or, the Milky Way. It is endless. If you get an opportunity, you can think more than just about a regular photograph. Then you can also show a lot of intimacy with the animal when it is up close, whether it is a physical characteristics, the perspective, and when it comes to the importance of that particular species in their entire environment, you can highlight the species and show its dominance and the prominence. Like for example, this is a image taken with a regular wide-angle telephoto lens. It I think is a good shot. Where you are depicting the tiger, then you see some birds over there.
Yeah.
You see a lake, and you are depicting the environment. Then there are rocks behind. So it is a reasonably good shot. Of a tiger showing the habitat.
Yeah.
But
And
the
second
moment
thing,
you come to
and the second thing is the moment you see this, it's a Ranthambore. See, tiger can be
it's a
anywhere.
Ranthambore,
Yeah, exactly. Looking at the image, it's just a Ranthambore forest. Yeah.
yeah. So the same thing, the moment you come out to a wide angle and a closer. So this is a very small species. I mean, many of us would even, go and, plan or try to shoot this otters as such, in the same perspective, when it comes to, a lesser popular animal or a lesser known animal, or, even with a species like this, you can get an image of this standard when the moment you start looking low and wide. If you look at the size of the animal with the environment around, how much of an importance you start giving to the subject over here, even in terms of the physical characteristics. True. And all.
True.
Then it's again very common or not a very popular species, but you could get images like this. This is an image of a tiger which I shot from a jeep. Again, it's my own image, which is shot from a higher angle. I mean, most of us have most of us photographers, we start here and this is what we do. You expect the animal to come very close, and you look at the angle of the camera where we are much high above its eye level or whatever. The moment you get lower than the eye level, you start showing the domination of the particular species over there.
Yeah.
This is again the first document in the world that point of time in 2018. I think this was the only image in the world where fishing cat was caught with the fish in its natural habitat.
Fabulous, man. Fabulous. And
Yeah.
thank you for sharing this beautiful world of fishing cats with us.
Thank you, Amit bhai. I mean, it took quite an effort to get an image like this. A lot of frustrating job, but I'm
How
happy.
long did you have to wait for this image, Anjani?
The whole project was going for about a year, sir, and this was one of the lucky shot which I got, I think, during the 8th month or 9th month of that entire.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your patience. Hats off to your patience.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. I mean, see, these are images which are very rare, and instead of I came to a point where there's no need to post one image every day. Instead of that, you get about 4 or 5 images in a year which are different and which haven't been done before, and that is where you would your work gets more appreciation, or even in terms of satisfaction levels, it's going to be much higher. It's frustrating and time taking, but yes. Basically, in about 2016, that was the time when actually I was getting bored of my own work. I was not liking my own work, and there was a day when I got this head-on shot of Maya. I was so excited and kicked about it. I came home and I was showing it to my daughter and said, "Daddy, it's the same image now." And I was punctured. That was again a time when I was not so satisfied with my work, and I thought my work was getting monotonous. And if a 9-year-old kid comes and tells you that it's the same image, and what am I trying to post images, and what am I trying to communicate through my image, or whom am I trying to please, or whatever it is. So that actually shook me. And when I thought, no, yahan se I should start planning something different from the regular images. And that was also the time when I was following a lot of work from Bernard Lucas and Johnny Armstrong and people like that. And I thought, okay, this is probably the direction which I should look at. And me coming from a DIY background, and I'm someone who would hack things and make things for myself. My entire life, whatever I had, I never had it in a stock position. Be it my cricket bat, be it my bike, be it my guitar, anything I would modify and make it according to how I want it. So since I come from that DIY background, I thought this is something I can make. So then I thought probably I should start remote photography with a buggy. And that's when it took time for me to learn everything, some failures and all that stuff. Somehow I managed to pull it off after a few months of an effort. And similarly, simultaneously, I was working on the camera traps also. So I was both learning the technology. I think for about a year I went, off the field. I didn't even go into the field. I was only working in a small rooftop workshop, and I was working on these technologies, trying to learn about the radio frequencies, the communication and everything. So yeah, that's how it started. I wanted to be little different, not about how better you're going to be, but at least I thought I should step aside and start looking things differently.
Yeah.
Better images are going to come, along the way, but you should start thinking differently from the crowd. I mean, that was the main motto behind the whole journey.
Yeah. In fact, congratulations for this beautiful product, Turtle Pro, right? Anjani?
Yeah, Turtle Pro.
And one thing I wanted to share with all the viewers and subscribers here, this product is available on a commercial use. Okay, and if you want to buy one, I'm going to send all the links in the description, so you can get in touch with Anjani, and he can actually make one for you guys. Okay, right, Anjani?
Yeah, sure. So again, this is more custom build. I make this according to, the photographer's choice, his cameras, his lenses, and, we could do a lot of modifications also depending on how the photographer wants it.
Super. In fact, we are so proud that these products are now available in India. Okay.
Yeah, Amit bhai. And I'm very proud to say that the entire thing is made in India.
Yeah.
And even the entire sales, after sales support is available in India. And uh, I can confidently say that this is much better than the products available globally and at about half the price.
I can vouch for you, Anjani. I've already used this product and it's a fantastic product, man.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is how the buggy looks, Amit bhai.
Yeah.
And it's very simple to use. All you have to do is, plug in your shutter release cable and then your HDMI cable, which is going to give you the live transmission of whatever your camera is seeing.
Right.
Then this is a battery, how you insert. Then you switch on the live view mode on the camera. Then on the left, you find is a control station.
Right.
So once your camera is on, you can just switch on the control station. And your control station will start seeing whatever your camera is seeing.
Super.
So right now on the screen, you can see what the camera is seeing right now.
Right.
Okay. So then you have that button on the left is the one which tilts the camera.
Okay.
Okay. It goes about 35 degrees up and down. And the joystick on the right is where you do the movement for the buggy.
Super.
Left, right, center. It can, pan 360 degrees on the spot.
Right.
Okay. And then that is a tilt function. So basically you can autofocus, and in some cameras like Sony, you can even zoom, toggle between video mode and a photo mode. And, you're going to get good frame rate also in the screens with cameras like Sony.
That is, I think, the fantastic feature, Anjani. I mean, you can zoom in and zoom out. But I think it's a selected model, right? So the people who wanted to buy that, they have to be very specific in terms of the models and all. They'll just tell you the models and you will make...
we can make it according to that.
Super.
But again, when you're doing this kind of photography, actually you don't need much of a zoom because you will be shooting more than that.
Absolutely.
18 to 16 mm. Unless it's a photographer's choice, I don't think, zoom is going to be much helpful. The reason why you're going this way is to get low, wide, and as close as possible. So I think that 14, 16, 18 mm should be a perfect setup for this one.
Yeah, but autofocus will certainly help here, right?
Yeah, autofocus is there. You can go burst mode, and you're going to have an immediate refresh also.
Okay. Anjani, one technical question: how far? What is the range of this particular radio?
See, basically, it can work about 100 meters, Amit. But if it's needed, we can push the limit also to whatever, to a kilometer or 2 kilometers or 5 kilometers also it can go.
Okay.
But very honestly, you won't be using it more than 50 or 60 meters away from you.
Okay, fine.
The more distance you go, you will lose the situational awareness. You won't know where the animal is. At 100 meters, it's difficult to judge that 2 feet or 3 feet.
Right.
And it's all about that few seconds where the game changes.
True.
So it's suggestible to be in that 50, 60 meters kind of a range where you are aware of the situation, you are aware of the buggy, and you know what the animals are in and around, and you also can see the terrain.
Right.
So under 100 meters is what I give as a stock feature, and that is more than enough to get good images.
Super.
So, and I've made it more convenient. This is a shell you see is made of carbon fiber composite material. Okay. I've also ensured the security and the safety of the animals while making the shell. So even if the animal is able to break this, the brute force, if the animals can break it, but even if they break it, they will not be able to consume or chew any of the component in this shell. Okay. So, I'm trying my best to even ensure the safety and whatever of the animal. And then you have the flash mounts over here where you can also put flashes inside when you do against the light photographs and all that stuff. So this is again, which is not available in the international products also. I think
Exactly. I was actually wondering what are those two slots given now, the white slots.
yeah, those are the flash mounts.
Super,
Where you
super,
can insert the flashes over there. So once you've done with the setup and testing, it's very simple. You just have to, push it in and tighten two screws and you're ready to run. And once when your work is done, you just have to switch on the screen, switch off the screen, and it's secured inside in a Pelican kind of a case. And it's just few minutes is what it takes to set up or close the.
Yeah.
This is an image which I took at Rajmundry course where I used the Turtle Pro to get this image. It was sunset and it was against the light, and I've installed flashes onto the Turtle Pro, and this is the image I could get on that one. This is a image of a otter which I got at Krishna belt. I noticed these otters coming and playing at a small island. So I set up my buggy over there, and I was sitting in the opposite island for about, say 70, 80 yards away. And I was waiting there for about, this project took about 3 days time where I was sitting in the opposite island. Initially, these guys would come, look at the buggy and run away. But it will take some time for the animal to get used to anything which is new. I mean, whether it is a buggy or a trap, anything which is new in their environment, they would be a little wary. It would take time for them to get comfortable with the buggy, and even we as a photographer have to be responsible enough to respect their time or whatever it is. It's not right on our part to push these buggies or any of these remote control vehicles to them. We'll have to make them comfortable, and for a couple of days, even if you don't get shots, you don't have to worry. I mean, you just have to keep your buggy there and let those species get used to that. Once they are used to it, then they would come like this, and they would even roll and sunbath and be very comfortable. So you'll have to be really patient, and not just if you have a buggy and you can push it to any animal. It would take a learning curve for you, for the animal also, and you'll also have to give it some time for them to get comfortable, and that is when you will get shots like this. This again is at the same island where I got this interesting image, where, it's coming out, and it was very cautious and curious looking at that new thing at that one. And then it came onto that sand and it rolled on. When you're using a buggy, it gives you, better mobility in terms of the reach, and you can reach wherever the animal is. Instead of anticipating the animal to come, like where even in the remote photography, the approach you do with a camera trapping is different, and the approach you do with a buggy is different. So here you have the advantage of where buggy can move, it can pan, it can go to wherever the animal is there. That's an advantage you would have, and you would also have a better control of the scene because you are already there.
True.
While camera trapping, you are not there. If any fine tuning adjustments is needed, you could do it. And again, when it comes to camera trapping, once you leave it, once when you set it and leave it, you cannot change the settings of the camera or depending on the scenario. So in a buggy, you could always call back the buggy, change it, or in case you have some other applications where we can also change the setting in the camera on the high one. And you can also visualize, you can also see what your camera is seeing, and you can set this, frame accordingly and then shoot. Plus the advantage, you can also shoot a burst mode, where in camera trapping, you will not be using burst mode as such. Where with a buggy, you can use the burst mode. Plus, if required, you can also use the zoom features. And an advantage is you can go or toggle between the video mode on the photo mode. You can toggle between both of them at a shoot where you don't have to come change the setting, and you can do it live on the screen. And you can use a lot of creative elements like flashes. You can also use torchlight, say if you're doing some night photography, You can start playing with some torch lights, whether it is front lit or back lit kind of a thing.
Right.
So your scope and creativity would be more using a
Absolutely.
button.
Absolutely. In fact, that adding a torchlight, the flashlight slots makes a lot of sense, Anjani.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It really,
this is how a photographer can think, no? When he creates a product. So it's a fantastic feature. What you
yeah.
added.
You would get very interesting shots, Amit bhai, because whenever you're doing this sunset kind of a thing with a telephoto lens, you will only get as a silhouette.
Absolutely.
You will only get a silhouette. But here is where you can even expose the animal and get a good exposure on the animal and the background, and you would get these interesting perspectives during sunrise and sunset.
True.
Shaji Mohammed sir could get a lot of wonderful images during the sunset and all that. He got this leopard jumping from the tree,
Wow.
from a very wide perspective. So you can get very good images by using this one. But again, we cannot, say that it's going to be an easy game using this one. You'll have to be really patient, wait for that moment to happen. This is how my typical camera trap box looks like. This is a Pelican case where I put my camera in a safe enclosure. And the one in my hand is a remote trigger, which receives the signal from the sensor to this one. And here is my sensor. And the entire thing over here is hacked right from a camera. I've hacked into it to get an external supply using a coupler. Then my wireless triggers are also hacked to get the external power supply. So we'll have to ensure that the camera, the wireless triggers, the flashes, everything runs for whatever your deployment period is, whether it is a week, 10 days, 15 days, or a month. So your battery management has to be according to that one. So nothing runs in the stock condition and you'll have to hack everything into it. So this is how I run all my external batteries, my wireless transmitters, and I ensure that the entire thing is run wirelessly, because while doing a job, we'll also have to ensure the safety of the animals. And I don't like wires dangling from the camera to the flash and to the sensor and all that. The animals could bite and all that, when there is a battery power from that one. It is not safe also, the animals could get entangled into that one. So I would always recommend to use, wireless connectivity to all this and not, disturb or harm the animals. So once you're done, you seal, and this is how my entire protection looks like. I make it look very dirty also, not very clean and expensive. So when you're tying it up in the jungles, it's better not to look very expensive. So I use all these cheap boxes and food containers to put my flashes. So when usually a tribal or someone walks in, it should not look very expensive also. So I look at very dirty and a little bit camo so it can hide into the environment. And this is a typical setup where you'd see a camera, a sensor, and 2 flashes is a minimum I would use at a particular scenario. And there could be times when I use more flashes also, depending on whether I want to, also highlight the background and the ambience and all that. So 2 flashes should be a good starting point for somebody to start with the, camera trapping. I would suggest about 2 flashes and more depending on the scene. Yashpal Bhai has even used about, 7+ flashes for a certain scene. So it depends on the creativity and whatever you're planning. Coming to why camera trapping, it is, you can document very rare and elusive species which you cannot sight them so easily. For example, the fishing cat. And it's very difficult for you to, because their typical movement is late nights or in the wee hours of the morning. That is where their movements are usually. And that is the reason where it's not easy for you to, visually see these, such animals. When I work for these fishing cats, when I was talking to the villagers or the boat guy who was actually taking me, even he rarely sees these animals. The guy, the animals which are there about 500 meters away from their home, even they don't get to see this. And when I was distributing these posters to them, to the village boys over there and the kids, as part of my Fishing Cat Conservancy work and education program, the kids were so happy to see their backyard animal, which they could actually never see live. So this is an advantage where we have, where, you can get these elusive species, nocturnal species in their, natural environment. That's the biggest advantage. Another thing is, your camera can run round the clock where you're not there, but your camera is working.
True.
And again, for someone like me who cannot spend, say, 200 days or 100 days in the jungle, and someone who can just give about 20 days, but my cameras can keep running there for however long I want, depending on, my power management and all. So even if I am not there, my cameras are active, they are on the field, they are doing their job. Then again, the advantage is you have the creative freedom to make the scene the way you want. Whether it is lighting, the angle, the ambience, everything, you can get creative. It's like you set up the entire studio and you expect the model to walk in, click its own photograph and go. That's the biggest advantage where you have, the creative freedom and the creative element of it, even during the night times. Then another advantage is there are times when you can get multiple species in a single deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Like in NSTR, in a single deployment at a stream, I got about 7 different species, and all unique frames is what I could get there. So that's another big advantage where you can get multiple, subjects in a single deployment. Then you can also get a natural behavior, or you can capture the behavior traits. Whenever during your presence, any animal is wary and they will not exhibit their natural behavior most of the time when in human presence. So you could also capture, say, the image of the fishing cat with the fish. Had you been there, the fish would have never walked with the fish like that. The fishing cat would have never walked like that. So that's another advantage where they show their natural behavior when the human presence is not there. And you can get some very rare moments which were not documented before, or which you cannot see through the naked eye. That's the biggest advantage of getting into camera trapping.
अंजनी भाई, एक छोटा सा होता है ना माइंडसेट कि कैमरा ट्रैप्स आर वेरी कॉस्टली, very difficult to make. You don't get stuff in India. Can you throw some light on how tough or how easy to make them in India?
Yeah, I would not. The whole thing is a little frustrating, Amit, but at the same time, I do not want to discourage anybody from this one. Okay. So, when it comes to expense, whether it is expensive or not, it could be expensive when you look at a large deployment. Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, I will give another analogy of this one. Say any 600 mm lens or a basic kit bag anybody carrying today is about 10 lakh rupees. You agree with this, Amit?
Easily.
Any guy sitting in a gypsy is carrying a bag of 10 lakh rupees minimum. I mean,
easily.
We are talking about an average photographer, not even a pro guy. An average photographer is carrying 10 lakh rupees in his bag. So if you distribute that one, this is going to be, much lesser than that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's not necessary that you need to go with a full frame camera, even with a used DSLR where you can buy it for 15,000-20,000 rupees and a couple of flashes, you can start our deployment. Super. On a ballpark, if we are talking about an APS-C setup, it should cost you about, say, anywhere between 70 to 90 per deployment. And if you're looking at a full frame deployment with used cameras, it should be somewhere around that, 1.5, the entry level full frame cameras. Okay. Where stuff available in India? Yes, it is not available in India. At least there are some companies which are making the sensors, now. Mm-hmm. And even I am planning to make a sensor now, but it's still under development process. But otherwise, yeah, your flashes and all that you need to procure from outside. Well, typically when it comes to your SB28s or SB80s, kind of a thing, which were age-old flashes, which are more suitable for trapping. Sourcing them is a little difficult, and again, Amit bhai, when you start off, you could start off with one rig
Hmm.
initially to learn the whole process.
True.
And you would take a little time as the entire game changes. Anything, even when you get a new lens, it would have a learning curve, and this would take a little more time. But yes, I think it would be, worthwhile for somebody to even start with one rig and then you move on depending on, upon your learning and uh, depending on the kind of projects you want to do, then that is where you can add up. But I think, trapping is going to be one interesting dimension where a photographer can add to the whole thing.
Yeah. So, Anjani bhai, see, you do a lot of project in association with the departments. So, your need is slightly bigger because you want to document something. But a guy like me who is not doing any projects for the departments and all, for me, I mean, around city itself, I think we can work around, right? Because you have so many things available with this camera traps and all around your homes and around your cities.
There are a lot of things which we can do, Amit bhai. I mean, see, first thing we should get out of the mindset saying that मेरे को tiger image आया तो I will be a photographer. We will have to get out of that mindset.
Right.
It's been 3 years for me. I haven't gone into the safari gypsy now. No, I've decided that it is not important just to get a tiger. Yeah? Any species, even if it is a normal egret, if you can show it in a different perspective, the whole game changes. You can, if you look at this guy, Bensemate, who's won about, I think, 7 or 8 global awards just with herons, pond herons, yeah.
Absolutely.
Pond herons and egrets. That was a game where he was winning all these Nat Geos and BBC awards and all that stuff. So we should step outside looking at, getting a very rare species to getting a very different perspective or a different shot of a very common species.
Very true.
We should start looking at things very differently. Even egrets, you can get some wonderful shots of it. It's not necessary that you'll have to go to a very big jungle with a lot of big permissions and all that stuff. You can get creative with any small damn things. You can even get a rabbit shot out of your some garden outside your in the outskirts of your city. You can get an interesting image of a even a rat, a normal rat. You would see even in these Nat Geo awards, there are a lot of guys who won awards with a rat image. So we should get out of the mindset that मेरे को Black Panther चाहिए या मेरे को panda चाहिए या तो it all, see, if you can go do trapping for a panda, it's going to be perfect. But at the same time, if you're not able to go there, don't limit yourself saying that अगर वो नहीं है तो मेरा काम नहीं होगा.
True, very true.
So whatever it is available within your limitations and within your scope, we can do a lot of wonderful job here. It's not that we'll have to travel far and wide to get these shots. This is the whole process of the entire camera trapping. It starts with your planning first.
Yeah.
The planning starts with you choosing your particular subject or the kind of project you want to do. The moment you're done with the subject, then if needed and if that area comes under any restrictive area or under the reserve forest, then you would need to apply for the required permissions. And I would not suggest anybody to go get into a reserve forest without permissions.
Very true.
It is not a good practice. So, if you don't have permission, we could work outside that domain, or in case you want to get into the forest, it's always suggestible to take prerequisite, follow the prerequisites and take permissions. And another good way to start, even before deploying your DSLRs, is work with your regular trail cams, your regular point and shoot, trail cams which you get to analyze, what is the frequency, what is the movement of the animal and the behavior. This can also go bait like, checking out the security for the cameras.
Right.
In case you lose a small camera before your, permanent deployment. And your trail cams are also will give you an index of the behavior of the animal and the direction in which it is walking and what time of the day it is walking. So it is important for you to get these preliminary data also before you go and actually deploy. And then, you should walk trails. Say, when you're working in a large forest, say 100 square kilometers or a 500 square kilometer forest, and you would just have 3 or 4 rigs or 5 rigs. And how is it that you're deciding that where to put these rigs? So a lot of field work is going to go even before you deploy. That you'll have to go around the forest, check where the paths are, where the frequency is better, where the habitat is better. You'll have to check all that, and that after that you do a predictive analysis saying that either this is where my chances of the camera trap is going to be high, and this is the best habitat I could get over there.
Right.
No, so there is a lot of predictive analysis going to be there. And then you'll have to plan the number of rigs. Again, it depends on the size of your project, and it also depends on your budget of how many rigs you want to deploy at that particular scenario. The more rigs you have, the better chances you have. But again, the economics also plays a role over there.
True.
And that is where your deployment cost is also there, where the deployment cost, whether you want to look at, the APS-C setups or a full frame setups, and the number of, rigs to be required to get that particular, image or that project going. Then we'll also have to measure the risk involved, whether they're going to be tribals or the villagers walking in there. We'll have to, look at the security of the camera also, because you're going to tie them out for, say weeks or months together. It's not right to risk your cameras there. So we'll also have to be careful. And this is a very, very, very important aspect before we do. So again, when we do the trail cam exercise, this is what we will also analyze, whether how safe the area is, how many people are walking in there, if there are any tribals, or if there are no people, if there is human presence available there. Then the speed of deployment. This is one which I've learned from Shivang Bhai, that our deployment, the way we plan our deployment, we'll have to be really fast in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're working in the presence of the animals, of say tigers or leopards or whatever it is. It is not right for you to spend too much of time during the deployment. And the more amount of time you spend over there, you're going to leave your smell also for such a long time. And where the animals will avoid that particular path if your presence is there for too much. So we'll also have to plan our rigs so that the deployment is fast and quick, and you get out of that place as much as possible. Then I would also suggest wireless, which I've also spoken earlier, so that,
Yes.
it's safe for the animals and it's also quicker to deploy. Then the preparation for your entire deployment. Once you've done that, this is the game I'm going to play and this is how my deployment is going to be. The most important and the challenging part is going to be your battery management and the power management, depending on your deployment duration.
Right.
So, in your entire rig, let's say there are 7 or 8 components which require batteries.
Right.
Say 2 flashes, a sensor, and 3 wireless units, and your camera. All this put together about 7 units on a minimum. Say any unit failing with the battery, your entire deployment is gone.
Very true.
So you'll have to plan that the entire 7 units work for a certain period of time. That is a major challenge you will, encounter. So we'll have to plan that battery management accordingly. Then I would suggest, while going to the field, you'll have to have a good toolkit. Again, I will show it in the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time you go to a forest, you will find a new situation and a newer scenario. And you never know what you're going to need, whether you need a cutting pair, whether you need a screwdriver or a nail or anything like that. So you will have to have your toolkit in place, because you're getting into the forest. Even for a small thing, you cannot waste the entire day. Whether it could be a tape, cello tape to bind something, or tie or zip tie. I would explain about the toolkit also at a later stage, but your toolkits is important.
Yeah.
Then I also take stumps. I do not want to damage. Whenever I get into the forest, I would want to leave the forest as it is when I'm done with my deployment. I do not even want to break a small branch to tie my flash over there. So usually I cut some stumps and take it and put those stumps and tie my cameras or flashes onto the stumps. It's not good for when we're doing some work. We should leave the environment as it is and not disturb the trees or leaves or whatever it is over there. Then since our cameras are running overnights and in all kinds of weathers, it is important for us to keep these dehumidifiers or moisture absorbents so that your flashes and your cameras don't get spoiled. This is a typical sensor of how it works. So on the top right hand side is a sensor. This is a PIR sensor, or it could be any sensor depending on the kind of technology you are using. So there would be a sensor whether it would sense a heat, movement, or the distance, and that sensor would send a signal to a microcontroller. The red one which you see is a reference index of a microcontroller, which sends a signal to the camera saying that what to do after it sends the animal. Like how many shots it's going to take and what is the gap it needs to give between a shot to shot, what are the total number of shots to be given, what is the flash recycle time and what is the gap you need to give between the shots, and things like that is what you would program here. And you can also program what duration of the time you want it, whether you only want that sensor to work in the evening or the morning or a particular time. So this is all done by a microcontroller which sends that signal to the camera and the flashes accordingly. So this is a basic outline of how a sensor works.
Right.
Now coming to the sensors, at every deployment the sensor would change. I mean most of us would think that if you have a sensor it would work for every species or every animal or every size. The sensors would change depending on the size of the animal, the speed of the animal, the distance which you want to get. At a scenario, depending on your frame, you will need a different kind of a technology or a different type of a sensor. So it is not that one sensor will do job for all. So even when it comes to fishing cat, I would have used about 2 or 3 different type of technologies depending on that particular scene. So, every scenario will need a different technology there. You could do, a lot with a, single sensor, but when it comes to precision, again, that is not what you will get.
Right.
You would have to go back and find that, after, 15 days or 20 days after traveling so much, you would find that, these were not the shots which you wanted to get. So, when you need to do a precise job, you will need to have that particular sensor for that particular scenario and that particular job.
Right.
Okay. So these are the broad categories of the sensors. One is a passive infrared, which reads the heat of a person. Typically what you would find in a security cameras or your surveillance cameras.
Right.
That is the technology. Then you have an active infrared, whereas where there is a beam, an invisible beam. So you have a transmitter and a receiver, and anything which is passing through that beam, that is when it will fire. So it is a very precise thing. So it is an active infrared. Then there is something called as a retroreflective, which is again more like an active thing where you have a transmitter and receiver on one side and you have a reflective mirror on the other side. So there is a beam passing through this and receiving, and anything which passes through, it will fire the camera. That is a retroreflective sensor. Then the fourth one is called the IR or the LiDAR, IR range or the LiDAR. So this is probably the best sensors available today in the market. These are used to measure the difference. In a generic format, these are the ones which are used in architecture and all that to measure the distance of the walls and this height of a certain bridge or certain thing. So these are typically generically used there for that purpose, distance measuring one. So in this this is a very I will explain in detail about this one in the forthcoming slide. And the fourth technology is a microwave, which only looks at the movement around, and it can detect movement for 360 degrees.
Okay.
Now, coming to the first one, the PIR, passive infrared sensor, I would run through the advantages and disadvantages. The PIR sensor, the advantages, it's very easy to set up because you don't have a transmitter and receiver and the alignment. So it happens very fast. The sensors are very cheap to deploy. They are really cheap, not very inexpensive. I mean, if you can make one, you can make it as less as 500 to 1,000 rupees also.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's that cheap. Then it is got a very wide field of view, also suitable for videos and all that. And plus you can also narrow it down if you need with a pipe or, another filter onto that one. It is very low power consuming, so it is useful for a long-term deployment.
Mhm.
Say on a few AA batteries, it could run for about 2 or 3 months also, depending on
Okay.
the brand to brand and company. So it's very useful for a long-term deployment. And reasonably, it can sense a good distance also, anywhere about 6 to 8 meters is what it can detect. So that's a reasonable range to work also. The the most disadvantages of this particular PR sensor is there are too many false triggers. Immaterial of the kind of perfection you're trying to get, there are still going to be false triggers.
Right.
Anything where the ambient temperature is more than 35 degrees, it would not sense properly, or it would start, where uh, the temperature of the animal and the ambient temperature is similar, they may not fire properly.
Okay.
Or whenever they are facing the sun, or there is a shadow, or the movements, or the leaves, where if it is against the light and if there are leaves moving, it would trigger your camera. So, and even if there is water facing the sensor, with every reflection and the wave, it's going to trigger your camera. And another disadvantage is anything that is cold-blooded, it will not detect.
For reptiles, it will.
Cold-blooded will have the same ambient temperature and that one, so it might not work for reptiles or snakes and things like that. And the response is very slow. So if you're looking at a very fast, high-speed animal, then PR is not your sensor to go with.
Right.
The next one is active infrared sensor. The advantages of this one is it is very precise. You have a beam and it is exactly going to fire there. So you can have 5 centimeter or a 2 centimeter precision of where you want the camera to fire. So you can have the precise job, the precise frame. Another advantage of this one is, usually if it is a new animal which is due to the flash, so in a PR sensor, when the field of view is a little wide, even before it comes to your frame, the moment the flash fires, it might run off.
Yeah.
So it's important that you get the first shot right. You don't have a second chance in camera trap. So that is where this comes into play. The moment it comes, it clicks and your game is done. After that, you don't know if the animal is still going to stay there or run away or get scared about the first time. Eventually, they will get used to the flash, but initially, it is always suggestible to get the right shot at that particular time. Then the response time is very fast. You will precisely get it at that particular time. And another advantage is distance. Even you can go to about, the scope can be even 20 meters. I mean, you will not go that wide in a camera trap, but even the distance is going to be good. And it's very good for small and fast moving subjects.
Okay.
So the response time is in few milliseconds. So it's going to be quick, and you can get the shot right away, and you can plan those perfect frames. And this is again a sensor which can be used for reptiles also,
Right.
where it is not sensing the heat, but it is only sensing the beam which is cutting through. And coming to the disadvantage of this one, the false triggers which this guy is going to give is very different. Since it is very sensitive, probably even dragonflies can, fire this.
Okay.
There are some advanced sensors today, but they are very, very expensive. You can also decide the size of the animal, but they are very expensive at this point of time. But if in case somebody can afford that kind of money, you can reduce the false triggers in this one also. Then another disadvantage is it's very power hungry, and the batteries will not last for too long. Probably it's good for a week or so kind of a deployment, and not more than that. In case you want to go more, again you need to have external batteries for these sensors.
Right.
Yeah, the setup time is going to be a little more in this one because you need to align the transmitter and receiver in that particular direction. So it is not really easy. You might probably need to use a laser light and all that stuff to align. So it could take some amount of time to deploy this particular sensor. So it is time taking. And the disadvantages when it comes to the alignment stability, when you align the transmitter and receiver, say some critter or animal walks in and touches that particular receiver or sensor, and if the alignment goes off, and in the next 15 minutes you will fill up your card.
Oh.
So that's another disadvantage for this one. Then next I'm not covering the retroreflective, which is again very similar to
Very
the
similar
active
to
one.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are very new technologies which have come there. That is the LiDAR and the IIR trans receivers, which I was talking about, the distance measurement one. I would explain in a small scenario where this is going to be useful when, if there is a bird perch and you know exactly that the bird is going to come and sit on that particular perch. So you can use this trigger where you can also decide that I want this between 151 centimeters to 153 centimeters.
Oh.
It is going to just trigger there and nowhere else. So exactly. So you can pre-focus on a particular perch and you can decide that 5 centimeters or 7 centimeters depth of field. Because, when you're looking at a very small bird and when you're going so close, the depth of field is going to be very, very, very shallow, few centimeters.
Right.
So this is a sensor which can, be deployed at that particular scenarios, where it's a very precise one in terms of the DOF also. Okay, so it's the advantages. It's very easy to set up because there's no alignment required, and you just have to point at a place where you want the sensor to work. It is high precision in terms of in terms of a millimeter precision. It is very, very, very fast. You can get all these birds in action and the bats and all that, which are high speed and very small. So you could use it for that particular game. Even the distance is good, if you don't want the sensor to be very close to the animal and where it's going to disturb it, you could have a good distance. You can even work it from about 10 meters of a distance.
Okay.
So, and it's great for small and yeah, again, you're going to get perfect frames with this one because it is millimeter precise.
Right.
And the biggest advantage is absolutely no false triggers in this one. Or at least to the minimum, where you're going to get precise one and not waste shots and the flash and all that. The disadvantages, it is very power hungry. You cannot run it more than overnight time. And in case you want to run it for a week or so, then you need a car battery to run this one. So it's that power hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And cost-wise also.
And it's only for that short term deployment.
Yeah. So cost-wise also this will be costlier than your AIR and PIR, right?
This is the most expensive one as of now. The most expensive one. A decent one would be about, say, $500. Getting it here would be, again, an expensive one. But again, yeah. Now we've discussed about the various types of sensors. As you move onto the field, the more deployment you do, you would understand the game that, every scenario is different. Every forest is different. Every species is different. And even for the same species, every frame would require a different technology.
Right.
You would start understanding this the more you deploy. Like when I am going to the field, I would carry a couple of them. And after going that, after I decide, after I see that place, I might change my plan.
Okay.
I might change the sensor. No, probably this is the one where I would want this particular sensor. So this would be a learning curve for you to decide. I would run down the points of, how someone should choose these sensors.
Sure.
One is you choose your sensor depending on the deployment duration. So that becomes a very important part, or rather the first consideration of the entire deployment is your deployment duration.
Right.
Then next you would decide your sensor depending on the size of the subject, the speed of the subject, and how small or how big it is, and what is the kind of depth of field or how shallow it's going to be, you know. And then you also should look at the surroundings. At some places, it would be a rocky terrain where you can't put the stumps and all that stuff. So it becomes very difficult for you to deploy that particular sensor.
Yeah.
So once you see that particular scene, you might change your plan over there. And every scenario changes, Amit bhai and Mohan sir. That is the game of it. It is a live scenario which is happening. What you think at home, you would sometimes visualize a particular frame and go onto the field and you would see it's different. And that is where you would need a different technology or a different sensor or a different kind of a setup. Then you would also look at the speed of deployment at what speed you're going to deploy it. If you have got a very short term deployment, then you would choose a sensor accordingly. Then you should also look at the cost of your overall deployment. So these are the parameters under which you would choose a particular sensor for that job.
Right.
Now I would like to quickly run through the cameras which would be suitable for a particular job. Just like any other photography, I would say, full frames are going to be a full advantage when you do this deployment. But the only disadvantage is you'll have to look at the deployment cost.
Right.
Full frames are going to be expensive, and they're going to be risking the environment, the thefts, the damage, and even the animals could damage the rig. So you'll have to, measure your pros and cons and then go. Otherwise, if you could afford, full frame is the best cameras to use for this one. Then lenses, suggestible focal length would be anywhere between that 14 to 18 mm is the most ideal lens. And you don't need faster lenses because you would be working in apertures more than 9 plus.
Okay.
9 to 16, or that is where your aperture. So you will really not require any fast lens for this one. And since you're doing a pre-focus thing, you will not also require autofocus or fast capabilities on this one. You could go with any non-autofocus old lenses also. The only thing I would suggest is please do not use Canon 10 to 18 lens.
Okay.
Which is not suitable for camera trapping. It doesn't wake up. So this is one lens you need to avoid.
Okay.
Then flashes. The most difficult part is procuring the flashes because all the latest flashes have the sleep time, and after 90 minutes, they're going to get switched off. Most of your flashes. So these are not suitable for a long-term deployment. So you will have to use a flash which can run for weeks or months or whatever your deployment time is, and would wake up and would only go to the sleep mode and not go to the switch off mode. So that is one important consideration which you'll have to look at. Then you'll have to look at the recycle time of a flash. What is the recycle time of from shot to shot, depending on which you need to program your sensor to take that number of shots for that seconds. So you'll also have to calculate your flash recycle time and the capacitors that hold the charge. Because the first shot is important. You cannot have a flash which fires one and then charges for the second cycle. Right. So this is another consideration when choosing your flash. And also see that it's got a possibility to hack or have an external power supply to run for duration.
Right.
And it's also suggestible that your flash has adjustable power settings. Or if you have a fixed flash, then you need to put the distance accordingly, whether near or far, depending on the lighting you would want. So this is my typical setup, where I found a creek, and this is again where you need to be a little creative in how you want. So you could see a big branch over there, which was not there. And I wanted the camera to be there. So I put up a branch and I set up my camera onto that one. And then you see two stumps on the left and right where I've tied the flashes and the sensor.
The sensor is on the right stump, right?
On the right side. Yeah. On the right side is what you would see. and this is the shot I got.
Oh, this
That's
is
Wow,
amazing.
this is amazing. Did you expect a leopard to jump like this?
Sir, this is the part of the entire predictive analysis which I spoke about. I knew that the tiger is going to jump here,
Okay.
Okay.
but leopard came in as a surprise. This actually I set it up for a tiger because I've noticed the pug marks on the beginning and the end. I knew it was a jump over there.
Okay.
So I wanted the tiger to jump, but luckily I got this one. So
Amazing.
this entire thing, when we talk about pre-visualizing, making a photograph, I think this is where I would, put it in that category. This is what I wanted, and this is what I exactly got in that.
And
particular-
basically, you have done a lot of homework. Tracking a cat, whether tiger or a leopard, and you just made. You just visualized that it is going to jump from there to there, and this is awesome, Anjani. Hats off to you.
Yeah. Yeah, even the sensor, I pointed exactly at the center where I wanted it to jump and where it wanted to capture also. So again, it becomes a very, you need to be very precise in the entire thing for that game to happen. You need to calculate the sensor speed also when you're doing such shot.
Okay.
So, this is one of the shot where, a lot of them said, Photoshop kiya hua hai. And that's the biggest compliment I got. Biggest compliment. If you read through the Instagram on this particular post, everybody would say that, Photoshop kiya hua hai, ye background se ye chipka hua hai. And that is so satisfying when you feel that a photo is so unreal.
True.
It was very satisfying. Agar kuch unreal laga, to that is where you feel you've achieved or you've done something really nice, which normal guys cannot think of getting that.
And they are refusing to believe it.
I'm very happy about it, sir. That's a big compliment I would.
Congratulations for this amazing shot, Anjali.
Amazing.
Mesmerizing work.
Thank you. And then we talk about the risks of camera trapping, and this is what happened next. 2 days later, after I got that shot, took my memory card. I was at least lucky to take the memory card, put a new memory card, charged the batteries up, and 2 days later, this is what happened. My entire rig got flooded in that stream.
Oh, God.
Lost my entire thing, my cameras, my flashes, everything in the water.
Oh.
So, guess it's worthy enough of, getting that shot. This is a risk of, camera trapping. I think this was the most difficult project I've ever done. In terms of, physical endurance, taking the risk to the setup requirement. I think this would be most challenging and most dangerous thing which I've ever done till date. And this I've done it with Masood Hassan. Me and Masood did this project together. Actually, I went to this Vizag forest for the barking deer. While I was looking at the trails of the barking deer, there was this small cave where my guide was showing that in cave ke andar there are bats. So I went and saw, and there were about 200 bats inside the cave.
Okay.
And my entire game plan changed on the field. I went for a barking deer, but I changed my plan when I saw this particular, phenomena happening inside the cave. So that day we went, I sat near the cave for almost about 4 hours, just observing the movement of the bats. And that evening we left and, we made a plan live. This is what my setup was. So there was no way I could rig up a sensor, tie my camera, or put a, stump kind of a thing. So we made a plan that we're going to build the entire frame on which we will tie the sensor, camera, everything, and then we will push it inside the cave.
Okay.
there was a cave inside a cave, and cave inside a cave. So this was a third level of cave, which was just about 2.5 feet, where you cannot even go inside.
Oh.
So when you could not even go inside, then how is it that you're going to set it up? So we had to, build the entire frame on these PVC pipes. We went, bought it on the hardware store. We built the entire structure on a PVC and then pushed it. This is how we tied 3 cameras on a PVC pipe.
Mhm.
Then we made a U frame to which we've tied the sensors. And this is how we pushed it inside the cave. I mean, with the help of the forest guards, we could push it inside the cave. And this was absolutely no way we could sit inside. The entire place was stinking of shit and urine of these bats. Absolutely no oxygen also. And every hole in this cave had a snake skin dangling outside.
Oh.
So we were probably, seeing about 15 or 16 snake skin dangling in this cave. So it was a, dangerous and a hostile environment also to work under. And every night after, we would get that shot, we would pull out the rig, go back to the hotel. We tied a tennis ball to a string, and we would anticipate the speed of that bat. We would swing the tennis ball, see where the sensor is firing, the amount of time it is taking to fire, because the bat was just 4 inches and it was pretty fast. And the camera was just about 12 inches from the bat. So the depth of field was so shallow that we were working different various depth of fields, the sensor placement, and every night we would readjust and again go and push it into the cave again. So this was a very tedious exercise, and this was a net result what we've got of a 4-inch fast flying Schneider's no sleeve bat.
This is incredible. And
Yeah,
simple
amazing.
word.
Yeah. Again, I think there are very few people in the world who've shot this particular species in its natural environment. You would see a lot of these bats in flight, in captured environment or whatever it is. But, I'm very lucky that I could get it in the natural environment.
What is the name of the species?
Schneider's no-sleeved bat. Yeah, this is again a pre-visualized shot. This is at the same place where I got that leopard.
Okay.
And the rock on which the brownfish owl is sitting is where I placed it. So you are creating a scene also.
Wow.
I saw the nest on top of that tree, and I thought this guy is going to jump to fish. And I created a path for other critters also to walk there. So this is where I talk about creating a scene.
Yeah.
You're making a scene so that the animals would walk in the direction what you want. So while I was expecting the leopard to still jump, the tiger to still jump on that one, I wanted the small critters also to come into the frame.
Right.
So this is one of the target, shot which I got. And luckily I got this bat also at that particular time at, the same 2/3 level with the interesting composition. So it's a very, lucky shot, I would say. Bat came in as a bonus. This is a shot of a leopard which I got it at NSTR. And just 2 minutes before this leopard walked in, there was a tribal walking there. I don't have the document at the moment, but that would, for the department, we could show that, there is a good coexistence of the animal where, within a minute, 2 minutes gap is where, both the animal and the human pass that particular area. Again, when we talk about the, scientific or, the studies which, these camera traps can help is when you get such documents where documenting the human presence and also the leopards and all that, which can, add a lot of light to that particular project.
Absolutely.
This is where I wanted the stars also to come in, but because of these new LEDs which the government has given, there's so much of light noise that I could not get the perfect exposure of stars, but it's barely visible. this is a long exposure shot where it is a 30-second exposure is what I taken the shot.
So because of the flash, the leopard got frozen. Yeah.
Yeah, the leopard is frozen because of flash, and the ambience and the background, I wanted to light it up with the long duration. Yeah, I am on this job, and probably soon I'll get a good
Wish
exposure.
you all the very best. I'm waiting for that day, that image.
Yeah, this is again a 6-minute exposure shot which I took. I wanted the star trails and the thing to come, but again, this is level 1. I could just find about few stars over there. Slowly, I'll get to that process. Again, there's a whole process is learning. I mean, by every shot, you come back, you would analyze, you would, try to make it better. You read the scenario better. I mean, your process will keep evolving as you keep moving ahead. Yeah, this is an image which I received the NIF award.
Yes.
Where you see the mother otter coming and sniffing the camera. Where, any new object or any new thing which comes in, the animals are very, curious or cautious about it. So you would see the animal coming, the mother coming and smelling and sniffing the camera. And once when it felt safe, that is when the cub comes in closer to that one. So I was very happy with the shot, and I got good recognition also after this one. This is again an image which I got an award in the NIF.
Yeah, and congratulations for this beautiful, beautiful image, man. You truly deserve it. And your favorite subject, the fishing cat.
Congratulations, Anjani.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Amit bhai. And again, when we talk about a pre-visualized shot, this was a pre-visualized shot. Usually the fishing cat's movement is in the late night and early morning, but this was one cat which's movement was early morning during sunrise or sunset. Okay, this again we got through the trail cam, and departmental camera showed the data that this guy was walking, during that particular time. So I wanted this shot during the sunset. So I've aligned my camera for the sunset, and even my flash settings were programmed to get that sunlight and the ambient shot. And I wanted this guy to walk in head on. That's what the entire trail cams were showing. But in this particular thing, he came from behind, and I placed its own poop over there. What it is sniffing. Usually the cats come sniff the poop and then again, do the fresh poop. So that is where I placed its poop, and it came to smell and it turned around, and that's when the flash fired over this one.
Okay.
Yeah, this is an image taken in Bera, and this I've done it along with Shivang. Me and Shivang were together in this one. Again, a very typical scenario where I went. This was a very new learning for me. When I was, planning and visualizing the shots at home, I was, thinking that I could tie the stump somewhere and, tie my camera somewhere. But this was a scenario where I could not do anything, where it was just rocks.
Yeah.
We just had to place the camera over there. And for security reasons, we thought, we're not going to use flashes also. So again, this scenario, after seeing the scene, the entire game plan changed. And this is where we just put a camera and no flash at all. We just use the natural lighting for this particular shot, and very lucky to get this one. Yeah, this is another image I personally like, or, I like these rim light shots. Even in natural sunlight, I used to, look for a lot of these rim light shots and silhouettes and all that. So this is one experiment I've done with the fishing cat, where I knew the path that that's going to go. Guy is going to come onto that tree at that particular time. I've just lit it up from behind, and I haven't used any flashes in front of this one. So you could experiment with things like that, which are a little difficult in a natural environment. You can use the flashes and the lighting according to the way you want.
So
this is a male tiger which I've shot in NSTR, and I think in recent time I'm the only guy who shot a tiger in NSTR in a high resolution image. And this is a young male tiger.
Anjani, when you say NSDR, it is Sri Salem Tiger Reserve, right?
Yeah, Nagarjun Sagar Sri Salem Tiger Reserve.
Okay.
It's the largest, I mean, combined together as a combined state, it was the largest tiger reserve in the country.
Wow.
But unfortunately, I mean, not much of a documentation was, done, or not much of photography was done in this particular forest. So I've done this project for Andhra Pradesh Forest Department as a combined project. The entire logistics, the entire field support was there, and more than 30 people were involved in the entire project at various times. And this is a male tiger which would walk for about 250 kilometers is where its territory is.
Oh.
Oh,
And from their trail cams and the pug marks, I was anticipating it to come for about every 15 days or 20 days. And that is what has happened. My rig was there for about a month and it just came once. And yeah, again, I don't know if you're able to see him. I mean, there's a good blue light on the background. I'm not sure if you could see it. I mean,
Yeah, we could.
capture
I think we can see it.
this one. Yeah. This again is at NSTR. Bears, you would see a lot of shots, but again, at this ambience and this environment and habitat are very rare. So I was happy to get this particular shot also. You could see all the mountains and all that behind, and this guy walking and straight, walking and looking into the camera.
Super.
Yeah, this again was a very predetermined shot. And even the the forest guy, before I set up the camera over, said I was telling those departmental people that the second shot this guy is going to look into the camera. And that is what exactly happened. The first shot, it was looking in straight. The moment that flash fired, it looked into the camera. So this is again a very much predetermined shot, and I wanted that eye contact to happen, and it happened exactly as I anticipated it. Yeah, this I really like. Personally, I like the shot because porcupine is something which is very common, but we actually don't get to see in the wild so much, and it's very difficult for us to get a normal good-looking shot of this guy. And I was lucky enough to get a perfect lighting and a nice exposed shot of this species.
Oh, honey badger.
oh.
I think this is the same area where that leopard is jumping, right, Anjani?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, when we're talking about making the images, I had a plan for that tiger to jump there, and I wanted smaller critters to walk through that one, so where I put the stones. And it exactly happened. The porcupine walked, the honey badger also walked through the same path. Again, one more very satisfying image when you say, make the image, you wanted it and you got it.
So other than tiger, now you got everything over there. Or you got a tiger also?
Yeah. I got good amount of species over there.
But what happened to the original tiger which is supposed to jump?
It came. One second, I'll show that image.
Yeah.
There.
This is that tiger. I wanted it. It came, looked into the camera, drank water, and again it went back again. It did not jump.
And it came very close to the camera, right?
Yeah. It came in pretty close to the camera, and it exactly came in where I wanted it to jump also.
Oh.
But again, it turned back. This is what it's all about here. You anticipate that guy would walk in here, so that guy will not have a timetable or same stipulated path every time. These are the surprises you're going to get. But at least I was lucky enough to get that eye contact of this guy over there.
Anjani, I know one thing is theft of camera.
Yeah.
Second thing is elephants damaging your camera. These are the two things you have to be very careful, and you lose your equipment. is there any other thing you have experienced? One more thing you said, flood has
Yeah.
spoiled
See,
your.
the moment your rig is in the forest, you have no control on it, sir. Okay.
Okay.
And even the fishing cat ones, the ones which I've deployed, there was no human damage. But over 15-20 days, my camera started the corrosion. I mean, the cameras and your equipment is consumable. The moment you get into camera trapping, they are consumables. Your cameras are not an investment anymore. I mean, it could be, theft, it could be vandalism. And there are times, it didn't happen with me, but it happened with other photographers where the moment flash fires, the tribals or some, poachers in the forest feel that, the department is going to get their images or something like that. And they would just pluck out the cameras or, vandalize the cameras and things like that. Then your cameras are going to be, damaged in the weather. If you put them too tight, the enclosures are going to get moisture.
Okay.
So there has to be a breathing space also inside. And the moment you have the breathing space inside, then you are exposing it to the, corrosion or weather or whatever it is. And there are times when your flash is, fire whole night and your flash is gone. Your flash is damaged. The moment this false triggers come in and, you could damage the flashes. So in the whole game, your equipment is just consumable. So you're just lucky enough. As long as they stay. Otherwise, they are consumables. You'll have to take that amount of risk.
So it is always
Animals.
so it is always advisable to use basic cameras and kit lens.
It again depends, sir. Over a period, it's again a good idea to have a combination of both. It's a good idea to have a combination of both, depending on budgets. But again, one thing, sir, I would not say that having a basic camera will limit you. You could still get good stuff. When I could get these award-winning images with those basic 11,000-12,000 rupees second-hand cameras which I got.
No.
So, I mean, camera should not limit you. But if you have a full frame over there, you would get a better image.
Right.
Surely, full frames and better lenses, better flashes, better sensors are all going to get you a better job. But definitely, you can overcome all the limitations of you having a bigger budget with your skill and ability and multiple attempts. You could, cover that aspect also. That's it, Amit Bhai and Mohan sir. I think I've tried to cover whatever I've learned and whatever information I could give to the, budding photographers or guys who want to start their camera trapping project. I mean, people can always get in touch with me on Instagram or Facebook, and any more doubts on camera trapping or how to start about it, I'll be more than happy to help.
And thanks, Anjani. Guys, I'm going to share all the links of Anjani's Insta handle, Facebook in the description down below. So anything has got doubt, please write it to Anjani directly. He's very active on social media. And Anjani, thank you so much for coming, joining, and sparing your time, making us understand the basic nitty-gritties of camera traps. And one product, it's very special, which is the Turtle Pro. So I'm going to share all the links in the description. You can go and have a look at it.
Thank you so much, Anjali. It was a great pleasure hosting you. This whatever you have shared, it is so informative and is so much of information. Not only to the viewers, it is so informative to myself. And one day I would like to join you and learn more on camera trapping. Thank you so much, Anjali.
Yeah, only one thing, Anjali.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, only one or two things pending, Anjani, is I wanted to see that Milky Way and the startle image very soon. I'm anticipating that. So the day you got it, please ping me. I'm going to share that on this channel, man.
Surely, Amit Bhai, this year you can expect 2021. I'm going to get you that shot. And it's been an honor talking to you, Mohan sir and Amit Bhai. I've learned so much from you guys. You guys are such an inspiration to so many photographers in the country. And I'm honored to be with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anjani sir. Thank you so much. Bye.